My name is Derek Mosley. I'm the director of Marquette Law School's Lubar Center. I want to welcome you here. I want to thank you all for being here and braving the weather. Thank you so much. This is our This is our Get to Know program, where we like to bring in people who affect our lives every day and then just get to know them a little bit better, and then we open it up for questions afterwards. As many of you know, April 1st of this year, we have a Supreme Court election coming up, and we have invited both of those candidates here to take part in our Get to Know program. Today we have Brad Schimel, Waukesha County Judge Schimel. We'll go into that a little bit more, but if you all right now could join me in welcoming Judge Schimel to our program. Thank you. So Judge, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Derek.
And I guess my first question is, where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born in West Dallas. My dad got out of the Army, met my mom. She was from Bayview, he was from West Dallas, and year and a half later or so, they had me, and my dad was working as a mechanic, and he decided that he wanted to get his education. He went back to night school, got his engineering degree, and all the photos when I'm little, in that just barely sitting up age, my dad's always working on homework in the photos. But he ended up landing a job with the Heil Company when they used to be here in Wisconsin. And every time he got a promotion, got a little more money, we could move to a little bit better house. And about 7th grade, we moved out to the town of Vernon, and I ended up going to McWanago High School.
So you went to McWanago, you graduated from McWanago, and then you attended the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Yeah, I started at UW Waukesha, actually. Did 2 years there, and then off to UW-Milwaukee for a political science degree.
Why'd you choose political science?
I liked all that. My favorite teacher in high school, Tom Helm, taught political science, and he made it enjoyable. I kind of loved it. But boy, you get your diploma after 4 years, and you look at Bachelor of Arts in Political Science.
Or your options.
What am I going to do with this? I could be a bartender or go to law school. So law school it was.
So you opted for law school. And so that was the reason, right? So you chose law because the political science major?
I love history. I love political science. I love reading, writing. So yeah, law school was the place. I wasn't going to go to medical school.
So you're at law school. Were there any programs that you took part in that have led you to where you are right now?
Yeah, I was at UW for law school. I did wear Marquette colors today, though.
We appreciate that.
Honor of this great institution here. But in my small group, leader or professor was Walter Dickey, who was former Secretary of Corrections and very criminal justice focused, and he kind of convinced me to try out the Legal Assistance to Institutionalized Persons program my first year.
And for those who don't know.
Yeah. Inmates in prison, if they've got issues on their criminal cases, they're entitled to a public defender. But if they've got other issues in their life, like, say they've got all this child support debt waiting for them when they get out, and it's going to have them upside down, they won't be able to get on their feet again, we might be in there to help them with that. I worked at Oak Hill Prison and at Mendota Mental Health Institution in the Civil Commitment Wing, and I loved that. It was hands-on, working with people to solve problems, and I liked the clinical program. My classmates went to law firms and were doing legal research and making a lot more money, right. But I liked that hands-on part, so I did it again and went into the prosecutor program. And I know you did back in the day, you did the public defender program,
Absolutely.
Same deal, where we got to go and work under the supervision of a lawyer, but start doing court appearances.
Did you get a chance to try any cases?
I did. I tried 7 jury trials before I graduated law school. At UW, they have the cane toss thing at homecoming of your senior year of law school. And the drill is if you catch your cane, you're going to win your first case. I didn't know what was going to happen if I dropped that cane because I'd already won my first case. I thought I'll upset the time-space continuum.
So you're coming to the end of your third year of law school, and you took a job at the DA's office.
Yeah.
How'd that happen? Because you were doing work with defendants. Was the public defender's an option? Did you think about the public defender's office, or were you always focused on prosecution?
You know, it was Professor Herman Goldstein. He's deceased now at UW. He taught courses on policing and justice, and I loved those courses, and he kind of gave me the nudge to look at the prosecutor program. And, I lucked out, too. They hired the local kid. They had a lot of choices to make, but I lucked out. The deputy DA that sat down to interview me, his kids were at McQuantico High School. So sometimes it's not what you know, it's just who you know or what you have in common. Absolutely. So I got that opportunity, and boy, never looked back after that.
So I know when I came into the DA's office in Milwaukee, everybody got shuffled into the misdemeanor court. Was that how it was in Waukesha County?
Absolutely, sure. They're going to put you in places where the stakes aren't too high if you make a mistake, right? You can't come out of law school and get hit with a sexual assault or something. So absolutely, it started out doing traffic cases, OWIs, and man, it was just try cases. You know, those first few years in the DA's office, I mean, I was trying a case every other week, and it was good experience. And you start getting that judgment to understand what's going to be enough for a jury to convict and what things you need to walk away from because it's not going to be enough.
And we actually met at a DA's conference initially.
Yeah.
And you did teaching. So were you teaching at the same time that you were prosecuting in the Waukesha County DA's office?
Yeah. I had built some subject matter expertise on a number of topics and ended up, found myself teaching at DA's conferences to, boy, when we first started doing the internet traveler cases and child pornography, I tried a lot of them. And so I got out there and was trying to help some of the other DAs who hadn't seen them yet learn how to get those cases successfully investigated into trial. You know, that's one of the best things about being in the DA's office is it's not all office work. I mean, you know this. If you invest yourself, you get out there and you go to the crime scenes with law enforcement, work it from the ground up, from the crime scene all the way to the jury trial, and it makes a difference. There are countless times that there was something that would have surprised anybody else in that trial, but I knew the answer because I was standing right there while they were doing the investigation. I loved it. And I ended up doing that for 25 years in the Waukesha DA's office.
Now, in that 25 years, is there any case that still stands out to you that you handled there?
Boy, there are a lot, and a lot of them no one ever heard about because it was some victim who had no notoriety. There was nothing about it that was ever going to catch the newspapers, but nobody else stood with them, and that was an opportunity. And I know, and believe me, public defenders get to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. They get to stand with somebody who's got no notoriety and be their sword and their shield for them. And I was in the DA's office doing that for crime victims. I think the one, that was, I think, the most complex, took the most effort of my life would have been back in 2019. There was a homicide in Oconomowoc. A young mother was murdered, ultimately convicted 3 guys. It was a murder for hire, and that case was complex. I was there first thing in the morning when the call came in and worked it right up all the way. That was rewarding. And I'll tell you, the mother of the victim, she's deceased now, but she had told me that, based on what had happened, her daughter being taken from her, that she was really questioning whether God cared about her life. And she'd had some other tragedies. And it was a tough case to prove. And I'd said to Barb, listen, if I can get the conviction on Darren, the father of the child who had the child's mother murdered, if I can get this conviction, would you give God another chance? And we walked out after the jury verdict, guilties on all 3. She just bumped me on the shoulder and said, "Okay, I'm going to go back to church and give it another shot." And that made that case a big deal for me.
Yeah, those cases when you deal with victims on those cases are different, right, than the cases like drug cases where all your witnesses are law enforcement.
Right. The victim is society in general.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So you're in the DA's office. You've been there 20 years.
25 it was.
25 total.
Yeah.
But how did you become the DA?
I don't know. I don't know how I ended up being that guy, to tell you the truth. I was just trying to do my work, do the best I could on cases. I'll say I worked as hard as anybody in the office. I took a lot of pride. That was kind of how I was raised, is you take pride in a job well done. And you don't slack, you don't leave it for somebody else to pick up. And I mean, all of a sudden, the boss was moving on, running for attorney general. There was going to be an open seat. My colleagues in the office and law enforcement in the county all came to me and said, "You should run." I was like, "Me? I don't have any interest in this," but I got interested and I did it. It was a long race, 21 months to a primary. That was a long race.
And your opponent in that primary was your colleague, right?
Yeah, another experienced prosecutor. He had left the office a little while earlier to go out in private sector, but we'd worked together for a lot of years. That made it a tough race because we were friends.
Yeah. That's a long primary. How long did you say that was?
21 months to the primary. Yeah. It was driven by things beyond our control. Paul Bucher got in the AG's race that early. And all of a sudden you got this vacuum and everybody's who's going to run, and all of a sudden it was, oh, geez, you better get in.
Yeah, yep. And that time that you were an ADA and ultimately the DA, what are you most proud of the work that you accomplished?
Yeah. There were a lot of things, but the thing that I think had the most impact, and like you can leave a place, but if there's a legacy you left behind, that's what matters. And the thing that matters the most to me was a group of 5 of us built our Child Advocacy Center, called the Care Center, also known as the Big Yellow House in Waukesha. I'd been doing sensitive crimes cases for many years, and we had this problem that when a child came forward, the only place to go, frankly, in all of eastern Wisconsin was Children's Hospital had a child advocacy center that you could go get a forensic interview, a medical exam, and things. But they were the only show in town. They were horrendously backed up, no fault of theirs. But you might have to ask a child who's reporting sexual abuse, well, hang on to this. We're going to schedule an interview for you. And sometimes it was 3 weeks. You can't do that. And you can't do that to that child's family either. We knew we had to build one. We didn't have any, there was no money. There were no resources. We had to go out and beat the bushes and build support. But we went to a conference, a group of us, to learn how to do it. We came back, committed. We're going to get this done. And it's thriving to this day. And it was the first full-service child advocacy center in Wisconsin. And what I mean by that is not only does a child go there for a forensic interview, but we also had an immediate medical exam available. And even if the child wasn't injured, sometimes it's important to give them the sense of well-being, because things have happened to them that they're not sure about, they're not comfortable with. And they can leave that exam being assured from a trained pediatric nurse practitioner that you are safe, you're okay. But while the child's getting that done, the parents are sitting down with a victim advocate who's going to explain this scary process that there's no handbook for as a parent. And they're going to sit down with counselors, staff, who are going to schedule the first appointments. One of the problems we had is, and you've seen this, we've talked about it before. They would go and they'd hand people a bunch of brochures. Call this one, call these people. You got to reach out to them. It's a family in crisis. They shut down, they don't do it. When there's that face-to-face contact, it's much more likely they follow through and they get their child going on, and themselves going on the counseling their family's going to need to heal.
But then you decided to make another move. For someone who wasn't so interested in politics, the running portion of the politics, you make a decision to run for AG.
Well, running for office it's about making friends, right? The person who makes the most friends wins. I like that part. When as a kid, we moved a lot, like I said, and I always had to make new friends at a new school, and that I kind of was used to that. I liked it. Running for Attorney General, yeah, absolutely not my plan. And frankly, I thought my wife would say no. Well, she had told me she would say no. She said, after the DA's race, that's it. You're not running for any more stuff. My kids were 1 and 3 when I started that, and but I got approached by J.B. Van Hollen, was the AG at the time, and he approached me and said, listen, nobody but my wife knows this yet, but I'm not going to run for another term. And he urged me to step in. So I said, I got to talk to my wife. I went home. She surprised me, and she said, yes. I asked, what changed your mind? Why? She told me, Brad, you need a change. You're crazy, Sandy. I love my work. I don't need change. She said, you may love your work, but it doesn't love you. She's a very perceptive woman who cares about me a lot, you know? And she was right. When she made her point, she was right. You know, I was invigorated by getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to crime scenes all the time. And she said, but you know, you come home from a day of that kind of work, and you don't talk to your family for half an hour after you get home.
Decompress.
Yeah, I gotta go decompress. She said, my kids are little, they're in grade school, and they wanna tell you about their day, and you can't, because you gotta do that first. And she said, you don't talk to your kids, you interrogate your kids. It's like, what? But she reminded me of an example. We had picked up my older daughter, she was 7 or 8 at the time, and she had told a lie, the kind of lie an 8-year-old tells. It's nothing. But we're driving home from picking her up at her friend's house, and I adjusted the rear view mirror in the truck so I can see her in the back seat. So I got her, boom. And we're driving, and I start asking her questions about this story she's telling. I start catching her inconsistencies. And I got her. All of a sudden, I get a Perry Mason moment. You don't all know what that means. But I get a Perry Mason moment. All of a sudden, she's confessing on the witness stand in the back seat. And I'm feeling good, like next witness. She's crying. My wife's looking at me like I'm a monster. And she reminded me of that. She said, Brad, it's not right. It's not healthy. You're in too deep. You got to take a step back from the front lines. She was right. And once I was away, I recognized it. And she was right about it.
And so you make that move to become the 44th Attorney General.
Something like that, yeah.
I did my research. And so talk to me about that position.
It is drinking from a fire hose. And I don't mean just when you're new. It's every day. First off, you're not always in the office. I could be anywhere in the state. There's something going on. But when I'm in the office, I step off the elevator from the 8th floor, and there's somebody waiting for me. Like, can we get 5 minutes of your time? And it's never 5 minutes. But it's something going on. I mean, as Attorney General, your hands are in everything. I mean, you're representing the state of Wisconsin, the legislature, the governor, all the administrative agencies. There's always something going on. Really thrilling position. And you have the ability to go after problems. As DA, all you can do is deal with the cases that come in and try to keep up. As Attorney General, you've got the ability to kind of look at the big picture and find out, how can we prevent these problems? How can we solve this? How can we solve things before they become a bigger problem? And you have resources. There's money and there are people that you can put on those tasks and do good things.
And everybody calls you General.
I didn't let them do that.
You don't let them do that?
I thought that was creepy. I have a friend I was in Boy Scouts with who was a real general, who went to West Point, fought in combat, all these things. He's a real general. I never let them do that with me.
Yeah, I thought that was wild.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's wild. So while you're in the AG's office, what are you most proud of your time in the
You know,
AG?
there's a long list of things that we took on. You know, right as I was running for office, the DEA stopped doing their national drug take-back program, helping people get unused medications out of their medicine cabinets, and those were, at the time, the pipeline to addiction. They stopped, and so I barely put my hand down from taking the oath of office, and the sheriffs and police chiefs were in my office saying, we got to get this back. It's useful to our communities. We did it. We got it going within a couple of months. We created it ourselves, and ever since, it still goes. Ever since, Wisconsin's always in the top 3 states in America for the most drugs taken out of our medicine cabinets and safely destroyed. Our Dose of Reality program on the opiate issue was great. we created the Office of School Safety that got resources to schools to harden their facilities to be better at keeping a dangerous person out, but at the same time recognize that this isn't just about hardening the facilities. Teachers told me when I did my 72 county roundtable tours, they all told me, we know by 5th grade which kid is going to be using drugs by junior high, which kid's going to be arrested by the time he's 15 or 16. But they said, we don't know what to do about it. So that Office of School Safety built in a requirement that if you want the money, you've got to send 10% of your teaching staff to advanced adolescent childhood trauma training. And then they're to go back and be train the trainer kind of thing. And they had to build a Office of School Safety or a school safety team with law enforcement, educators, and psychological professionals that when a teacher identified a kid at risk, he had someplace to go for someone to do something about it. I think those are real answers. One of the things I'm most proud of is our law enforcement wellness program. Recognized that I knew from my experience in the DA's office, we lose 4 times as many officers to suicide than we do to duty death. And it's a frightening number. And I knew we had to do something to start changing that. And I knew it from my own experience with my wife related to me, that, you know what, this job isn't your friend anymore, Brad. I recognize that in law enforcement, if that's what I'm getting as a prosecutor, what are they getting out on the road every day, dealing with it when it's at crisis mode? And so we put together a program that focused on, there's the employee assistance programs. Law enforcement doesn't go to those. They don't go to HR to talk about their problems. Peer-to-peer networks work, but they're tough to cobble together. We also created a chaplain program, and we trained and credentialed over 400 police chaplains. Some of those chaplains still call me to this day. And I'll get a call saying, Brad, there's another one out there who's still on the job and okay, thanks to this program being there. And I'll tell you, if you took away everything else, and that's all we ever accomplished, that would have been worth the effort to get that call someday.
Yeah. And then, so 4 years as Attorney General.
Yeah.
And then appointed judge in Waukesha County.
Yeah.
And what was your first assignment as judge in Waukesha County?
I went to criminal, which I thought that was going to be trouble because I'd only been gone for 4 years, and I thought, oh man, is the defense bar all going to substitute on me, and this is going to be a fiasco? But they didn't. I got almost no substitutions at all.
How far are you in your term?
Oh, I'm in my 7th year now.
Okay.
So I've already, I was appointed, I had to run pretty quickly in April, and then I got elected. So August 1st of that year, I really started my 6-year term. So yeah, I'm in the 7th year now, and I'm up for re-election April 1st. So this is for all the marbles. I can't run for both things.
Right.
So.
Yeah, judges have to give up
Yeah,
their seat to
yeah.
run for another. So started in criminal, currently in civil.
Civil,
How do you like civil court?
it's the promised land. Oh. I mean, in criminal court, if you ask the assistant DA and the assistant public defender in a courtroom, hey, I'd like you to brief this legal issue, you're going to hear 2 thuds. That's the public defender and the assistant DA fainting because they don't have time to write you a brief. They don't have time for all that. And it's all just, it's grind. It's just all day long. There are some cases that are, different and exciting, but it's an awful lot of, you're seeing the same thing all day long, dealing with people who, frankly, they're wounded, they're broken. I have a notion someday to maybe write a book about this whole experience. And I'm going to give up the title and somebody will steal it, but the title I have in mind is Not What I Expected. Because you expect, if you're watching TV, you're seeing stuff in the news, you kind of expect that it's all black and white. And I found out it's not. It's almost all gray. The people that are there in court are there because they have a substance abuse disorder. They have a mental health problem. They grew up in a terrible environment where nobody gave them a better example They just got a series of bad breaks, bad relationships, employment ran into trouble, you name it, all those things that landed in them in a place where, frankly, they never expected to be. And I can count on my 10 fingers and my 10 toes out of 35 years. I can count on those 20 digits the number of people that were just evil. There's very few like that. You know it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in this 7 years that you've been on the bench, what are you most proud of?
Boy, I really enjoyed my time as the presiding judge over the drug treatment court, which kind of came full circle. When I was DA, I drove the charge to create the drug treatment court and to have the opportunity to preside over it. But boy, it was the part of the week. Wednesday afternoons were the part I looked forward to most and dreaded the most. The early part of the hearing, you're dealing with the people who are struggling, and it's tough because in the throes of addiction, they're lying about everything. But you're not there to break them. You're there to build them up, and it's a really delicate balance to do that because you don't want them to fail. You're not looking to revoke them and kick them out. You're looking to have them come around and succeed. Because for too long, our justice system thought if we just separate people from their problems, they'll figure it out. So lock them up for a while. They'll come out. They'll be fine. Treatment courts have been one of the best things we've ever done as a criminal justice system to recognize that if you don't address the underlying behavior issue, you aren't going to change the person, and they're not going to seek to change, and they come out the same or worse than before you locked them up. So these programs take the opportunity to try to get that redemption moment. So that takes me from the side of it where you're dealing with the lying and you're trying to get them to adjust their behavior to the side where they're succeeding. And people who've never had anybody tell them in their lives, good job, proud of you. You're sitting there as a judge with your robe on all above everybody and telling them, I'm proud of you. And sometimes for the littlest things that you're proud of them. And good job. And man, they walk out of that courtroom on top of the world. And I think that was the most energizing time in this. But again, man, I dreaded Wednesdays because it was like your roughest day dealing with your kids, but these are grown adults who are really good at lying. It's like anything, if you practice your trumpet a lot when you're a kid, you get better at it. If your whole life is building a lie around you, you get really good at lying. And boy, they come in and they give it their best.
So if you had to reflect on ADA, DA, AG, and now on the bench, the criminal justice system, it's changed drastically from the moment you started to where you are right now. What would you like to see change in that system?
Well, first off, we need to deal with the shortage of criminal defense bar that'll take indigent cases. It's wrecking counties across our state that we have people sitting waiting for their case, for their preliminary hearing to get held because we're having trouble finding someone that'll take this case. It's wrong that they're sitting warehoused for that. That's something we need to address, but deeper than that, look at the reason why so many of them are, like I talked about. It's mental health problems, it's substance abuse disorder. We need to do a better job recognizing those problems when they're small and having some resources to deal with them before it becomes a big problem. We're shooting ourselves in the foot by not doing that, but it's expensive and it's hard. Anything that's expensive and hard, nobody wants to touch it.
Yeah, true that. So why run for Supreme Court?
Well, this wasn't my plan. If you'd asked me a year and a half ago would I have ever considered running for Supreme Court, absolutely not. I did my time. I ran for statewide office. I drove to Madison every day and dealt with the different world that is Madison, the bubble of government there. I love it back in Waukesha County. But I watched what happened in 2023. I mean, I know Janet Protasevich. We've known each other for years. She's a good person. But this campaign that had promises about how you're going to rule on a case before the case is even filed, you haven't read any briefs, you haven't heard any arguments. We've got to restore objectivity to the court. This happens all the time. In civil court now, it happens all the time to me that I get the briefs on a case, I read them, and I have an inclination. Like, I'm thinking that the plaintiff or the defendant, whichever it is in the case, they probably got this right. But I have some questions. I schedule for oral arguments. My law clerk would poke her head in the office and ask, which way do you think you're going to go today? And I think this is it, but I have questions today, right? Oh, yeah. We go in, I get my questions answered, and I change. It's the other way, is the right way. You have to commit as a jurist that your mind is open until the last word is said. We ask that of every juror that serves. Every jury panel we swear, after they take their oath, the very first thing the judge says is, in order for you to properly function as a juror, you need to understand this. You are not to begin discussing this case with each other or with anyone, and you are not to begin deciding the issues of this case till you've heard all of the evidence. You've heard all the arguments of counsel, and I've instructed you on the law. We tell that to every single jury panel. And that's the only way they can be truly objective, is if they follow that rule. Judges need to do the same. And if you can't make that commitment, you have no business putting the black robe on.
So how do you classify your judicial philosophy then?
I'm a judicial conservative. Judicial conservative and political conservative are not identical. Same thing with judicial liberal and political liberal. What a judicial conservative does is the foundation of what you do is you don't make law. You interpret law when you have to, but you apply the law as it's written. When there are ambiguities in the law, well, now you're going to be forced to try to interpret the meaning of the ambiguity, but you try to stay as faithful as possible to the intent of the legislature when they did that. I'm also an originalist when it comes to the Constitution and the amendments, that they're to be viewed in terms of the perspective of those that ratified the document or the amendments. So those are two. And there's another piece to my judicial philosophy that I don't think judges talk about enough, and that is humility. Humility means having respect for the limits on your own power. And judges, the judicial branch was always intended to be the weakest. They're always intended under our system to not get headlines. It shouldn't be shocking what the courts do. You need to respect that the legislature has powers that you aren't to invade. The governor has powers that you're not to invade. And I think that's a critical part to a philosophy, is humility.
Which aspects will you be pulling from in your career has prepared you for the bench, the Supreme Court bench?
It's the time on the front lines where I got to see close up the challenges people face. The notion that there are always two sides to the story. You, as a prosecutor, you get the police reports on your desk, maybe some video evidence that you're going to view. You review all that, and you make a charging decision based on it, but you should always know that there's going to be another side of the story. You've got to keep your mind open to that. You're an advocate then, but you represent the people, not any particular victim or anything. I think those aspects, that has taught me. I hear people talk all the time. They see a story on the news and they conclude, oh man, that guy's a bad guy, he must have done this. And it's like, the prosecutor may says, well, I don't know, they haven't proved it yet. Let's see if they can prove it. And if they don't prove it, that person's not guilty. And I don't know, it's just, I think that perspective that there are the two sides, and you gotta wait. You gotta hear it all. And I tell you, as a prosecutor, the worst nightmare, I read a story the other day about two brothers who have been incarcerated for 24 years for a crime that now has been proven they didn't do. That's an absolute nightmare for our justice system. That's horrendous. That's a prosecutor's worst nightmare, is how you get back up and work again if that happens. You got to make sure that only guilty people get locked up.
It's a different world we live in now, right? From when both of us started. And, you know, everything's political, right? So how do you think you're able to juggle your impartiality or remain impartial in this political environment?
It's actually not just easy, it's liberating. Like you just said, everything is political now. Our personalized, everything on TV, even shows. You know, you watch Saturday Night Live, it's political. It's all political. It's when you get on the bench and you turn it off. You don't want any part of it. Tell me the facts of your case. Convince me. Tell me the arguments, why you think the law says this or that. Tell me what law you think applies. And you set it all aside and decide it based on the litigants in front of you without regard to all the noise out there in the world. It's liberating. It's a great way to go to work. And I never thought I would say this because I never wanted to be a judge, frankly. I loved being an advocate. Being a judge is really, it's the best of the career. It really is, because you get to rise above all the noise.
I didn't ask you this before, but I meant to ask you, what about the bench don't you like?
First off, especially in criminal court, you are far and away the least powerful person in that courtroom. I mean, the DA decides what the charges are. The DA decides what they're going to stick to, what they're going to go after. And a lot of times, I'm like, this young prosecutor, and I'm like thinking, you're never going to prove this case. This seems, but you got to let them go. You got to let them do their job. And, you know, the defense counsel, more powerful too, because they're going to work with their client to decide, hey, are we going to accept a plea offer, or is this going to trial? You don't get to control even it. The first time you have any kind of power is when you get to sentencing. And then, boy, then it's turned over to you. But you have to let them, you got to let them do their thing. And you can't help. That's one of the hardest things.
Right.
You can't help. You're not a lawyer anymore. And sometimes you want to. You get used, but you figure it out. You get used to it, and then it works.
Is there anything about the current state of the legal system, how about the judiciary, that you'd like to change?
I'd like people to pay more attention to it, to be honest. You know, we know from November 5th, 3.4 million people voted in Wisconsin. We expect 1.5 million to fall off for April 1st. You know, if we get 2 million, that's going to be a really high number for an April 1st election. It's unfortunate that a lot of people don't recognize how important court races are. And for Supreme Court, it's a 10-year term. That is the longest term in Wisconsin government. It's going to be a long time. If that person fails you, it's going to be a long time before you can move them out.
When you were a prosecutor, what kept you up at night?
You know, I slept at night because there was competent defense bar that did their jobs and put me to my proof, made sure that guilty people are getting convicted and not innocent people getting convicted. The times I had trouble sleeping at night, well, it wasn't trouble sleeping at night, I was intentionally staying up. I mean, trial practice, when you're in trial mode, you're up. You are working at it till 2 o'clock in the morning, setting your alarm for 5:30 and getting back up to go get back on it again. And
I missed that.
I gotta tell you,
miss
there's
that.
a part of me that misses it, but there's a part of me that looks and says, that's a younger man's game.
Yeah, true that. True that. What about on your being on the bench? What kept you up at night while you were on the bench? Still on the bench.
You know, I don't have things that keep me up at night. I do my best during the day to get it right. I try to be prepared, so when the arguments come in, I know where they're coming from, and I'm ready to adapt to what they're arguing, and I know the questions to ask. The job doesn't keep me awake at night. Just do the right thing. Try to get to the just end result. You know what? I guess there's one area that does trouble me a little bit. Evictions are tough cases. I mean, they're emotional. And boy, and you get a lot of them in the fall where now, the winter months are coming and we don't have enough housing and somebody's getting evicted. And it's a contract, between the tenant, the landlord and the tenant. And you don't get to put your thumb on the scale and say, I feel sorry for this person, so I'm gonna let them stay. You can't do that. And it's troubling. I've had a couple of those that have left me leaving the courtroom feeling pretty empty inside, like, man, I don't love this. I don't love it, but it was the law, and I had to apply it. I'd say those are tough cases now I think about it.
What do you hope to bring to the Supreme Court bench?
Objectivity, period. When you come to the Supreme Court, you file your case, you file your briefs, you come in and you make your arguments, and you should be counting on every single justice hearing it, that they're gonna wait until they've applied the law as it's written to all those facts and all those arguments. That's what we have to bring back to our Supreme Court. No more prejudging stuff.
All right. Well, at this point, I'm done with my questions, and we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Once you have a question, raise your hand. We're going to bring a mic to you, and then so everybody can hear the question.
Thank you. My name's Angela. I'm a business owner in town. And I just want to say thanks for being here. I really appreciate these types of programming where Derek hosts, where we can kind of get to know people, kind of get that common sense of humanity when we're all very divided right now. So you seem like a really great guy. Feels like somebody I could have a beer with or, hang out with.
I like beer.
But I do have to say I'm a bit afraid of you becoming a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice. And I just wanted to just share, when I was 19 years old and a college student at UWM, my very first sexual encounter was non-consensual. I am continuously grateful I had the ability to control whether my body and life were upended by an unwanted pregnancy. And now, as a 45-year-old woman, a business owner, a mother to an amazing teenage son, and a wife, I am grateful to continue to have control over my body's reproduction and health at this stage in my life. I would be devastated if I ended up pregnant right now trying to have a child at 45. So my question to you is, what role do you feel the government should have in whether a woman can control her reproductive health?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm sorry to hear about that tragedy that struck your life when you were younger. It sounds like it wasn't something that ended up you feeling like you got justice in the end, and I'm sorry for that. My wife and I are very blessed. 21 and 23 years ago, two 18-year-old young women, still living at home, still in school, found themselves with unplanned pregnancies. And they gave us the gift of a family we can't have biologically. So this, I have a personal perspective that leads me to treasure life even when it's unplanned. But when the United States Supreme Court issued the Dobbs decision, they didn't outlaw abortion. What they did was recognize that it's not in the Constitution. And if it's not in the Constitution, the power belongs to the people and the states. And they put it back in the hands of the people, where it properly belongs. No judge or justice should be running or serving in a way that upends the will of the people. And there are many occasions where, like I talked about with the evictions cases, where it might not be what I want, but the legal outcome is what has to win the day. The people of Wisconsin should decide this issue either by referendum or through their elected legislature on what they want the law to say. And as a judge, I have no business undoing their will, whether I like it or not. So you have no reason to fear me. The body in control of this issue is the voters of Wisconsin, and I will respect their will.
You mentioned you're an originalist on the Supreme Court decisions. Why do you think that the founders had all this knowledge 300 years ago or 250 years ago, and things don't change that much in terms of Supreme Court decisions?
Because they were foundational principles, and if they're changing all the time and morphing over time because of changing will among the voters, then they're not enduring. The Constitution has to be an enduring document. If there's something that needs to change, I mean, for instance, when America finally got rid of slavery in our nation, there were amendments that were necessary to accomplish that. Make those changes when it has to happen, but there otherwise has to be an enduring foundation on which we work. Otherwise, it's just functioning off the will of judges who take their finger, wet it, and put it up in the air and see what the popular opinion is. And that's not democracy. That's not a republic. It's not mob rule, but it's rule by whoever has the strongest public opinion about an issue at the moment. The Constitution has to be an enduring document that forms that foundation.
Judge, I have a two-part question. First of all, at the federal level, the president appoints judges to the Supreme Court and the Senate votes to confirm. In Wisconsin, we have an elective system. My first question is, do you have a preference one way or the other? And the second question is, just out of curiosity, of the 50 states in the union, how many states have appointed judges to the Supreme Court and how many have elective?
I'll answer the second question first. I don't know what the number is. I think it's relatively evenly split, but I don't know the exact number. I guess I don't need to know. In terms of whether judges are appointed or elected, I think it's hard to take the politics that surround it out anyway, because you're going to deal with political appointments, unquestionably, versus a political election. I kind of lean toward the notion that the voters get to make the decision, as opposed to politicians who make it for them. Some states have a process where there's an appointment and then there's a retention election. I think that's the case in Pennsylvania. That's interesting, and that maybe that provides a hybrid that takes it out of the raw election process in the beginning, but then lets that judge serve for a while before the citizens can decide whether they've served appropriately or not. I don't know, maybe that makes sense. But any changes to that process won't get made by me.
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
I'm seeking clarification. You made two statements. You said that the judiciary should be the weakest of the three, what I was taught to believe were co-equal powers.
Yeah.
And then you said you wished that voters would pay more attention to the judiciary. So how would you reconcile those two statements?
I don't know what's difficult to reconcile about them. I think that, the founders did. You can read the writings of the founders when they crafted the Constitution originally in the 1700s. They intended that the judiciary be there to arbitrate claims, but not to be making policy. And in a certain way, that makes them weaker than the other branches that get to put forth policy that affects our nation's future. The courts weren't designed to do that. But I don't think there's anything inconsistent with that, with hoping that voters would pay more attention to court races and recognize that they are important. I don't see the inconsistency.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Judge. Thank you for coming today. As a law student, we write a lot of briefs here at the law school. So my question is for you, what are good things you see in briefs that you like as a judge? And then what are things that you would recommend that we don't do in our briefs? Thank you.
One thing that gets lost in all of this is it's called a brief. And sometimes it seems that lawyers have a notion that the longer they write, the more compelling it is. The opposite is generally true. Yes. The more you can get to your point and make it, rattling on, over-repeating yourself over and over again doesn't make it more compelling. I think that's the first thing. Get to your strongest points. Get them in front of the judge. And the other thing, concede the things you can't win. Be done. Just get rid of it as an issue, because then the judge can focus in on the things that matter, the heart of the dispute. And I don't see enough of that. They want to cling to every fight they possibly can. And we're not up there like dealing cards, like, well, one for you, one. No, it's not like that. It might be that one side gets all the cards and the other side gets none. So find your strongest things. Get to it, get it done, concede the things that either you can't win or they don't matter. Get rid of them and keep it brief. I mean, most judges I know, when we talk at judicial conferences, boy, you start getting around 20 pages, and if you haven't made your point, then you're probably not going to make it with anything more you write.
My name is Andy. You were talking about originalist ideas in the laws. I can understand back in 1800s when you had to take one bullet and drop it into the musket after you put all of the other stuff into it, why people should have the guns to defend themselves from the bears and God knows whatever else was, going after them. But nowadays, when a 10-year-old can have a machine gun, essentially, everybody running around with the guns to the point that you don't know when you are safe. They didn't shoot up 50 kids in a matter of 15 minutes back in 1800s. How can you not change the laws, whether that's one like that or the one that obviously thinks that on the basis of religious beliefs, women should carry that pregnancy no matter what circumstances were? How can you today wait for legislators to change those laws when all of the districts and who gets to elect which legislator are rigged?
Boy, there's a lot to unravel there. I don't know that I can unravel all of it. Democracy can be messy, right? Waiting for the will of the voters to be accurately reflected in the laws can take time and difficulty. But if you're asking me as a judge, yes, I can't make those policy decisions. They're going to have to be made by the legislature, by the lawmakers who should be reflecting the policy will of the voters they represent.
You make the judgment, though, at the end, so who you are will make a difference.
What he said is, I make the judgment at the end, and so who I am makes a difference. I have my personal views about many issues, but it is the law that guides. And policy, the things you were talking about, those are policy type decisions that have to be made by the legislature. And you know, there's a fundamental reason for that. Legislatures hold public hearings. They announce a bill that's being proposed, and members of the public can come and be heard on that. And legislators, if most of them are elected for 2-year terms. If you don't think they're reflecting the will of the voters in their district, they can be thrown out in 2 years. And they represent small districts where it's a smaller group of people. You can run against them. Judges don't have public hearings. We don't gauge the will of the voters. We hear arguments on the law and the facts of a specific case. We don't engage with the public. We're not allowed to talk to the public. It's why we have private bathrooms, because they don't want us during a jury trial going out and getting confronted by one of the parties in the men's room when we might not be able to hustle out of there quickly. Judges and justices are very purposely disconnected from all of that. Well, that doesn't make us a very good body to make policy. We shouldn't. And that's why the system is set up the way it is.
Good afternoon, Judge. Thank you for coming. One thing I'm worried about in this election is the massive outside spending and influence that has happened. We saw it in 2023 as well.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, Elon Musk endorsed you over X. You said you would be open to a Trump endorsement in recent interviews, and Elon Musk announced a 6-figure ad buy supporting you in this election. I just want to know if you're open to that type of outside influence and if you support the Elon Musk ad buy.
There is no outside influence. I appreciate anybody that will help me get my message out there, because it's hard to reach all the voters in Wisconsin. I wish it could work that we could just do bus tours and stop and have people in all the communities. I've campaigned in all 72 counties, and my purpose in doing that, my purpose in getting in the race 16 months before Election Day, was to try to reach the voters, to bypass all of that, so they could see who I am. They could check and find out that I don't have any horns. I didn't go bald on purpose, but it's helpful to show I don't have any horns. I'm not running on some agenda to undo anybody's will. But let's be clear. My opponent didn't just get an outside group spending money on her campaign. She got $1 million from George Soros, cash, to her campaign. That's a little different. She's got $1 million from the governor of Illinois, cash to her campaign. It's happening on both sides. And ultimately, the only answer to it is that the individual running for office, and frankly, this applies to all offices, whether judicial or legislative or executive branch, you can't be for sale. People want to support you. It should be they're supporting you because they like the things that you stand for, not because they're buying some end result. And that's the only way it's going to work right. But I can't do anything to stop the money that comes into these races now. I served on a lot of nonprofit boards over the years. Boy, any one of them, you could take a fraction of this money and do an awful lot of good with it. And I wish we were doing that. But I've got to exist in the world that I'm in, and this is it.
Thank you, Judge, for being here. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen the executive branch in Washington enact a flurry of executive orders on a wide variety of issues. There's been a lot of subsequent lawsuits, and our Vice President, J.D. Vance, recently said that judges shouldn't be able to control an executive's legitimate power. I'm not going to ask you about what you think of those specific comments, but how do you feel, what's the role that you feel judicial review should play in, because our founders created three branches of government for a reason. So what role do you believe judicial review should play in limiting or applying the law in terms of an executive's power?
Well, built into the phrase that the vice president said was the legitimate exercise of executive power. When there's a dispute about whether that exercise of power is legitimate or not, well, then it may have to be the court that resolves that dispute. That's the role of the courts in all this. I'm not sure what else you needed from me on this.
All right. Well, we are at our time. I want to just personally say thank you to everyone who's here. As someone who ran in those spring elections, and you got the vote total, and it was a third of the people who were registered to vote. So I want to thank you all for being here, braving the weather. And I want to give a round of applause to our guest, Judge Schimel.
Thank you all.
And I just want to let you know some upcoming programming. On the 28th, we will have a get-to-know with Susan Crawford. On March 5th, we have our first Wisconsin poll of the year, Marquette poll. On the 18th of March, there's a water law program in regards to agriculture and its effect on Wisconsin's water. On the 17th, we have Sister Helen Prejean will be back for a get-to-know. And on the 24th, we're bringing in our face of the case, Mary Beth Tinker from Tinker versus Des Moines. Will be here to talk about that case and First Amendment rights in schools. So once again, thank you, Judge Schimel, for being here, and thank you all for being here as well.